The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's Friday.
It's Friday. And you know what?
Wait a minute. I've got a...
You seem to be modeling a new line of clothing.
The fall line for Spindle City. This lovely windbreaker with our logo.
It's beautifully lined, comes in multiple colors.
and it came in really handy today in the rain. So
yes, it did. I was using it several times.
Here I am, nice and dry.
It's amazing. You know, I went to a wake last night, and it's amazing how even the most non-political corpse draws every politician in the city. And, of course, people who are associated with the politicians. And one of the principals, actually several of the principals of the Quequechan Rail Trail debacle were present. And one of them spoke with me directly and said, this is going to be very interesting to see how this mayor does this because he's bound by a contract to do this. And it was part of the deal, I guess, to purchase that land or to take that land. I don't have all the details, but I thought it was very funny that he said this. And what's really interesting is that it's not as simple as the mayor sending down a letter now to the city council to overturn the easement because it's part of this a sale agreement or something. So it's going to be interesting to see how the mayor gets out of this one. But I'm quite sure that the Quequechan Rail Trail advocates are going to be up in arms. And as they kept calling it, it was a deal, it was a deal, it was a deal. And one of the gentlemen that I spoke with yesterday turned around and says, you know who's getting the shaft here? The guy who entered the deal last. He's the one that's getting the least out of the deal. Everyone else got something. Quote, unquote, everyone else got something, but this guy who came in last is getting the, I'm going to say crap end of the deal, but that's not what was said. I'm sure our audience can determine what was actually said.
Yeah. Well, you know, but the whole thing, again, look, this is just another, just another example of lack of process and doing things the right way, as we talked about even in the last show about, if you get private industry, they will lose money if they don't do things right. And so they try to do things right, and they give it every effort to try to save money and to try to, to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed but not government. They just rush to everything, and they worry about how it looks on camera or how it looks during a election season, and then damn the torpedoes. And in that Our View article in the Herald News, it says the mayor and the city council now have to choose between telling a company that follow the rules that the rules don't matter, and telling constituents their wishes don't matter. Well, just like all the way back to the purple bags, nobody cared what the people thought. And now they're worried how many years later because it's an election cycle. So are they going to tell the company that followed the rules don't matter? Maybe. Probably. This is a campaign season. This is the only time they need the constituents. So they may worry about what the constituents want more than the rules, but it doesn't change the fact that neither of those things should have occurred.
Well,
had they actually had a longer public dialogue on this and dealt with it, and also made sure that everybody understood what the rules were, and and it says here that they approved a document full of legal jargon on what was admittedly a busy night, but that's irrelevant. Like I said, still the city council should either understand This is the reason I've always advocated that the city council have its own attorney. Because, you know, we know that the corporation council works for the mayor, and he will always fashion something in the likeness of the mayor's opinion. But this was the thing about it, you know. I mean, I think they should have their own attorney, but regardless, it's still an opinion. They're going to look at it, and that's what lawyers do best. That's why lawyers are so loved in our society.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't care if it's the 10 Commandments. I can get two lawyers to argue on either side, pro and con, because that's what lawyers do. And then you have to go to court to get a final decision, but it's not really final until it gets to the Supreme Court of the United States, and then it's final. So, you know, our judicial system is not that great either. It's made to perpetuate itself, but it's there. But, you know, the reality is this was an agreement. It's an agreement, and I mean, it's not that complex. I believe, you know, it may have been legal jargon, but I think that, you know, if they had their own lawyer, these things should be reviewed. You know, the reality is most people who have to deal with legal issues normally have their own attorney, just like the retirement board. We don't listen to corporation counsel. Retirement board has their own attorney.
You mean you're smart?
And yeah, well, you know, it's only, you know, you want to hear something, and he's a specialist in that field. Just as when you were in the union, we had a union attorney who was going to deal with union issues.
Right.
So it's, you know, it would, I mean, to me, it's ludicrous that our city council doesn't have their own lawyer, and I know there's always big debate about it, but the fact is, look, they are a separate entity from the mayor. They are, you know, they are not the executive branch. They're the legislative branch. They should have their own lawyer. You know, I mean, if you go to Boston, the Senate has their own attorney. The House has their own attorney. Most political bodies that have to deal with legislation and litigation have their own lawyer. Why the city of Fall River doesn't have it is beyond me, and maybe that's the reason we get into so many problems, because you don't have a specialist. It's like going to the golf pro to get a diagnosis on your medical condition.
That's
you know,
it.
so it's like...
Or having a garbage man do your brain surgery.
That's right. So why, you know, this is another, but it's a symptom. I mean, this is an issue.
Well,
But how many times have we seen issues like this where lack of process created a problem?
Well, I'll give you another lack of process, because of course they're listening to me listen, and it's not like anyone watches our show, as you know. There's not one viewer out there right now, except for the fact that they came up to me and they said, hey, do you know that I presented to the administration several times on how to get rid of the rainwater tax? And this is a person who is an appointed member of a board or commission. I said, no, I did not. Yeah, we've determined that if they cut the rainwater tax by 1/4 every other year, first and foremost, whoever the administration is, they will continually get elected. And number two, at the end of 4 to 8 years, or 4 to 8 cycles, they will have eliminated the rainwater tax. I'm going to quote what I was told. And again, this is hearsay because it's coming from somebody who got it from somebody. I was told that they can't get rid of that tax because it generates over $5 million a year, and they need that money. Imagine that. A way to save the taxpayers some money, but because they need that money, they're not going to get rid of it. And you can think, well, who was that brought that up? Was that Bob Correa?
Yeah.
Created that rainwater tax? So that goes back to another Correa administration. And this city can get rid of it. They can get rid of it if they choose to. But they won't, because you, the taxpayer, don't matter. And you want to know why you don't matter? Because their mantra in Fall River, as it has been for a number of years and will remain for a number of more years, is
screw you, taxpayer!
The only thing about that, and I love that, but we should get it so it stops on bankrupt. at the end, because that's what's going to happen. Well, CJ, like you said, you're right. But they'll never get rid of anything because they'll never stop spending. They can't stop spending, because it's been 20 years since we had a mayor in there that actually worried about raising taxes and fees and tried to control spending to a degree, because there's spending that's unavoidable. Let's face it, we're not that naive. I mean, people say, look, the city has to pay for gas, it has to pay for electricity, it has fixed costs of government, just like you do in your home, and they do go up a little bit. And they do go up sometimes annually, and you have to deal with it. And there are negotiated, pay increases that you should. I mean, people deserve to get some type of raise. Maybe they don't deserve $30,000, just like the state reps didn't deserve
100.
Yeah, $35,000 per little stipend, but obviously you need a pay raise. This is one of the problems nationwide. We've seen all the people in the upper echelon continue to have their pays increased, yet the people at the lowest end of the wage scale, their wages are actually decreasing a little bit because, the people who need it the most get the least. And, the city of Fall River always talks about, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. But there's never a dialogue about controlling spending. It's always like, okay, more pay raises, more everything, no cutting fat. Those terms that used to be buzzwords in government years ago. I remember virtually every election, you heard words like, we're going to cut the fat. We're going to have a lean government. We're going to eliminate all excess spending. All these things are all part of it because they wanted the taxpayers to believe they actually cared. Now they've thrown that in the barrel. They don't even attempt to try to convince you that they care about you or your plight. And the people out there who are on fixed incomes trying to hang on to a house, they don't care. They actually, rather than not, they show you how little they care because they have the audacity to march people up at council meetings and tell you, what are you complaining about? Taxes are supposed to go up all the time. Really? How many people in this city can march into their boss's office and say, well, my salary's got to go up? Why? Because it has to. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. There are people who haven't had a pay raise in a couple of years. Some of them more than a couple of years at their place of employment. There are people in this city, a great percentage, because we have one of the highest percentages of elderly and retired people in the Commonwealth, that virtually get no pay raise every year. And if they do, it's negligible. I mean, you look at they quote, 3% COLA. It's not 3%. It's 3% of a maximum of $12,000, which means that the maximum increase they can get in a year is $360, which is less than $1 a day. There are some people that are getting, based on their income, less than 1% in their COLA. They're in the decimals. So you're going to tell me that someone who gets less than $1 a day can afford their taxes to go up $500? So they've already got a $140 loss just with the tax increase. Add to that the water fees. Add to that the other cost of living, because Supermarkets don't care that they only got 70 cents a day. Their prices are going to go up too. But there's a total insensitivity to the people in the world and in this country and in this city. You know, the attitude is just keep spending money. Nobody cares. And you know something? They don't, because they don't have to suffer the consequences that you do. You can't give yourself a $65,000 stipend like the Speaker of the House gave himself, or an $80,000 stipend like the President of the Senate did. You can't give yourself a pay raise every year like our state representatives can. You also can't have a tax holiday. So, you know, remember that at the polls. This is what we keep telling you. You know, people can keep saying there's nothing we can do, and that's 100% correct if you don't get up and get off your butt and vote. When the people stand up and vote, if everybody went to vote and voted people in who cared about this and would control your taxes, things would change. And it's the only way to change things. That's why I don't care who you vote for in November. Vote for the people you think will do the best for you. I don't mean politically. I mean as a taxpayer and as a citizen of Fall River. But you know something? Get out and vote. I mean, you'll be able to knock me over with a feather if we get 35,000 or 40,000 people out to vote. That would be, I would be, regardless of the outcome of the election, I would be ecstatic that because the people actually got out and voiced their opinion, not just the people who have a vested interest. So
I still think 40% is poor, but hey, it's better than we've been doing.
Well, you know, I mean, God, when you get when you get 8,000, I mean, come on, let's.
I know.
I mean, come on. I mean, it's
less than 1/4 of the pot of the.
It's ludicrous, but remember, CJ, what people say when they use that argument, and I hear it all the time. I'm not going to bother because nothing's going to change. You're right. If you don't bother, nothing is going to change. But they don't remember when you look back in that day of yesteryear, when political candidates and political officials cared about, worried about raising fees and taxes, tried to control spending a little bit, we had pretty good turnouts at the elections. That was one of the reasons. It wasn't because they were some kind of great statesman they were so altruistic they cared about the regular person. No, they worried about their job. And in those days, we had good turnouts at the polls.
Right.
And they knew that if they raised taxes, I remember when it was almost unheard of to raise taxes in an election year. It was like, nobody wanted a city council, mayoral candidates. Nobody would dare tell the people that, hey, you're supposed to pay more taxes every year. It was like, oh, no, there'll be no tax increase this year. We are holding the line. Why? Because they would have stormed the polls with pitchforks and torches to burn them out of office in those days. And it's got to get back to that. We saw what happened in a presidential election. When you get the electorate inflamed and upset, you can do wonders. Look what happened in a recall. We took someone who had won by an overwhelming margin, 70-30. Flipped it 180. Why? Because people were engaged. They were upset.
And this mayor still supports those purple bags, but now he's going to get rid of them because it's an election year.
That's
Just
right.
like he's going to get rid of the easement over the Quequechan Rail Trail. It's an election year. Understand, people, election year promises usually mean nothing. They're bupkis.
He also promised not to have the purple bags in this year's budget, but they're
in
there.
there. But they're there, yeah.
And even if he did eliminate them,
Where's the money going to come from that they
the
had?
money's going to come from another place in the budget, which creates a hole in that
Exactly.
part. Could have been used for some. That's the key of this thing. I want to see someone who's going to eliminate the purple bags by figuring out an alternate source of revenue to replace that revenue, not taking it out of another place in the budget. Because if you take it out of another place, it leaves a hole there. All you're doing is moving that hole from the loss of taking the bags out. If you plug it up with something from anywhere else in that budget, now there's a deficit. Oh, it's free cash. No, it's not. There's no such thing as free cash. And they don't want to lose any money, as they said.
Well, what's interesting is, he quoted that, enterprise funds have to be self-supporting. And under the previous administration, it wasn't self-supporting. So I got rid of the enterprise fund. But he used the enterprise fund, quote unquote, to pay off all of those Teamsters. But there was no enterprise fund. And there still is no enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is gone. The money that you pay for those purple bags does not go for trash. Don't let that lie be telling. Don't you believe that lie for a moment. That money goes into the general fund because there is no enterprise fund anymore for trash. It goes directly into the general fund, which means he can spend it on $35,000 pay raises for people. It doesn't necessarily go for trash.
Or as they said so well in our view, it said, telling a company to follow the rules don't matter. But we know they tell us that all the time. We told them that we didn't want them to get a pay raise after the Halloween massacre.
And they still do.
And they changed the rules.
Right.
Because they don't have rules that apply. Because they either ignore the rules or they change the rules. We don't get to do that.
Well, that's just the nature of the beast. I'm quite sure a lot of people maybe read the initial story and then the 4-page article about FROED backs Fiola as Mayor Correa denies claiming he demanded firing. And I'm going to quote the mayor as is in this article. According to the article, the mayor demanded that FROED fire Ken Fiola. Frank Marchione, who's the chair of the FROED Board, said that at an impasse with the mayor, it doesn't look like there'll be a compromise soon. We are left working unilaterally for economic development. If you're not being paid, what are you doing it for? That's my first question. But we'll move on from there. Accordingly, Mayor Jason Correa II denied he made a demand that Fiola be fired. That is a complete and total lie, he said. We have witnesses to that.
I'd like to see the witness list.
So would
and
I.
see how many don't work for him.
Right. And then he added, I did not demand that or tell them how to run their board. My problem is this, Mr. Mayor, and by making this statement, you have reaffirmed comments from city councilors and other people in the community which said that they can't speak with you because you talk out of both sides of your face. You lie to them and then you tell another story on the other side. And if people can't trust you, how can you expect to vote for them? And the people that are voting for him are doing it because they're zombies. They're mystified by his ability because he's a master at speech. He's a master speaking.
I demanded the tape of that meeting. Well, wait, no, forget it. Let me retract that. I don't want the tape.
Exactly. You wanted the tape to be released, then you didn't want the tape to be released. We know that certain neighborhood leaders were thrown under the bus by you during that taping. We know that. We have found that information out, and we're digging further. And at some point, that tape is going to come out, Mr. Mayor. And when it does, hopefully, and I pray it comes out before the general election, not to ruin your chance of being elected, but so that the people can make an informed decision. Because by virtue of the fact that you're demanding or begging not to release the tape, the people are now starting to ask, what do you have to hide?
Yeah.
What do you have to hide?
Especially in light of the fact that you immediately after the issue occurred, basically demanded that it may be made public
Right.
to vindicate yourself. And now all of a sudden, now you're taking into consideration whose feathers are going to get ruffled.
And in this article with Kevin O'Connor, you had to state, you have witnesses to that. Why do you need witnesses? Is it that nobody trusts you anymore, Mr. Mayor? These are questions. I'm not pointing a finger of allegation. But, you have to really question what people can believe and what they can't believe. Well, because you're saying this. And
but my question is, what are they even involved in this thing for in the first place? I mean, why is he even in this process? FROED is an independent agency.
Right.
As they've said so many times, especially when you tried to get public information on them, they always reminded you that they were not a city entity. They're an individual, So what is the mayor, who supposedly has cut ties and disenfranchised himself from this organization, what is he doing in a dialogue at all?
Well,
that's I mean,
according to Mascioni, the main hang-up is the insistence that Ken needs to be replaced. We've conducted a vote of confidence, and unanimously, we want Ken to stay.
Yeah, but that's my question. They're an independent entity.
Right.
Why? Did they call you up and ask you if you felt that Ken should be there? They're the board. They run it. What is he? I mean, what is this doing? Even being a story? Why did he even attempt to influence a board? It's like that's what they get. That's their board. They make the decision, and obviously, this is a love-hate relationship, and they just can't. They can't really separate themselves. Okay, you don't want them. You don't want to have anything to do with them. You threw them out of City Hall. You took them to court for the rent, and so forget about it. That's it's
forget
like
about it.
What are you doing here?
Got to forget about it. That's what we got to do.
That's right. Forget about it.
But the interesting thing is, I mean, wasn't it earlier this week that Ken Fiola said that he's putting together a package to get the Amazon headquarters to consider Fall River? Well, why is he doing that? He said that he felt it necessary to do that work. He's not being paid for it. Or are they? See, this is where the questions come in. What's happening here? He's saying that they're looking at rail now. They're focusing on rail because it's moving ahead faster than they expected. Why are you focusing on it? It's not your job. You have contracts that are outstanding. Finish those contracts, and you know what? Like it or not, let it lapse. The mayor has to accept the fact that Kathy Ann Viveris can't do economic development.
I long for the days when they had the Fall River Regional Task Force, when they put all these people in one room and everything was transparent. The Herald News reported on everything, and they had people from the business community, labor, everybody was represented, and everything was given a really good public airing before any decision was made,
right,
including the Education 2000, which resulted in all these new schools that were built, were done in the 90s by the Fall River Regional Task Force. And, it was a very, very...
Now we know who to blame.
It was, yeah, well, it was a very, very... Well, they didn't... Not how they were built, but the fact that we needed new schools, and we did at the time. But the fact is that, the thing was, it allowed due process. It allowed things to be put out to the community, to be put out in the newspaper, to be looked at and commented on by people in the business community, in the labor community, in the general community, in the population. It was an extremely effective vehicle. But now it seems that camouflage is the best method. So stay angry, everybody. Have a good weekend, and maybe tomorrow it won't rain.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the weather doesn't seem to want to cooperate. Have a great weekend, everybody. Look for the weekend flush on Sunday, and we'll see you on Monday. Stay angry, people.
That's
Have a good
right.
one.